"Stop, I'll buy her," he said. "Call her fat, I don't care, I see a girl worth saving." The words thunder across a frozen frontier street as a drunken father holds his own daughter on an auction block. The crowd jeers, laughter sharp as a knife, until one rugged rancher steps forward, his voice shaking the dust and silence. What begins as a desperate rescue soon twists into something no one expected. The girl carries not just shame, but dreams no one ever gave her the chance to speak. And the man who bought her? He carries wounds deeper than any scar and enemies who won't let mercy stand. As the law closes in and a blizzard rages across the mountains, one question hangs heavy in the cold air. Will this unlikely pair find family and freedom, or be torn apart by the very town that mocked them? Every time I see your comments, I'm reminded how stories connect us across distances, backgrounds, and hearts. If values like respect, courage, and compassion still guide you, then you're part of this story too. The bitter winter wind howled through the streets of Pine Ridge, Colorado, whipping snowflakes into tiny whirlwinds that danced between the wooden buildings. The sun hung low on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of deep purple and amber. Outside the Eagle's Nest Saloon, a crowd had gathered, drawn by the harsh, slurred shouts that cut through the evening air. Sam Harlan stood unsteadily beside a wooden auction block, his face flushed from whiskey and cold. His calloused hand gripped his daughter Anna's arm too tightly as he yanked her up onto the platform. Anna's cheeks burned with shame, and she kept her eyes fixed on her worn boots, trying to make herself smaller despite her size. Her threadbare shawl offered little protection against the biting wind or the cruel stares of the townspeople. "Look here," Sam bellowed, swaying slightly. "Who will trade good whiskey for this fat, useless girl?" He gave Anna a rough shake, making her stumble. "Can't even fetch a proper price for her. Might as well get something worth having." Laughter rippled through the crowd like poison. Anna's shoulders hunched further, and she wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold back tears that threatened to freeze on her cheeks. The wool of her shawl scratched against her chin as she tucked it closer. "5 bottles," someone called out mockingly. "She's worth at least that much." 3 bottles and a deck of cards, I bet another voice joined in. The cruel suggestions grew louder, each one a knife in Anna's heart. She could smell the tobacco smoke and whiskey on her father's breath as he continued his drunken auction. The wooden platform beneath her feet seemed to shrink with each passing moment, leaving her nowhere to hide from the growing crowd's jeers. "Stop." The single word cut through the laughter like a blade. The crowd parted, revealing Ethan Ward standing at its edge, his face hard as granite. The rancher's weathered features were set in lines of disgust, not at Anna, but at the spectacle before him. His voice, when it came again, was quiet, but carried the weight of steel. "I'll buy her." The mocking voices fell silent. Even Sam Harlan's drunken swagger faltered as Ethan strode forward, his spurs clicking against the frozen ground. The rancher's coat was worn but well kept, and his eyes held a steadiness that made others look away first. "You serious, Ward?" Sam squinted at him suspiciously. What would a lone rancher want with... "I said I'll buy her." Ethan cut him off, already reaching into his coat. He pulled out a leather wallet, worn smooth with age. The crowd watched in stunned silence as he began counting out bills. His winter savings, meant to see him through until spring. Anna's heart hammered in her chest as she watched the transaction. She'd seen Ethan Ward in town before, always keeping to himself, trading for supplies and leaving without unnecessary words. She'd heard whispers about him losing his wife and baby to fever years ago, about how he lived alone on his ranch miles outside of town. Ethan finished counting the money and held it out to Sam. "This enough to satisfy your thirst?" The contempt in his voice was clear, but Sam was already grabbing for the bills, his eyes gleaming with greed. Moving with deliberate care, Ethan stepped forward and offered his hand to Anna. Unlike her father's rough grasp, his touch was gentle as he helped her down from the block. "You can walk beside me," he said quietly, meant for her ears alone. Anna's legs trembled as she stepped down, expecting to be ordered to follow behind like a servant. Instead, Ethan waited until she was steady on her feet before turning to his sorrel horse, who stood patiently nearby. The horse's breath came out in white puffs in the cold air, and its coat gleamed dull red in the fading light. The crowd still stared, but their earlier cruelty had been replaced by confusion and disbelief. Some shifted uncomfortably, as if only now realizing the ugliness they'd participated in. Others whispered behind their hands, already spinning new gossip about the strange turn of events. Ethan took the horse's reins in one hand and began walking, setting a pace that Anna could easily match. She fell into step beside him, her mind whirling with questions she didn't dare voice. The frozen main street stretched before them, leading away from the saloon and the life she'd known. Just once Anna glanced back over her shoulder. The crowd was beginning to disperse, and her father had already disappeared back into the saloon, clutching his blood money. The sight of his abandonment should have hurt more, she thought. But instead she felt something else stirring in her chest, something that might have been hope. She turned her eyes forward again, studying the broad-shouldered figure of the man who had just bought her freedom. His face remained unreadable, but there was kindness in the way he shortened his stride to match hers, and how he positioned himself between her and the cutting wind. The sun sank lower, casting long shadows across the snow-dusted street. Their boots crunched in perfect rhythm on the frozen ground as they walked away from the Eagle's Nest saloon. Behind them, the smell of whiskey and sound of raucous laughter faded, replaced by the quiet whisper of the winter wind and the gentle creaking of the sorrel horse's leather tack. Anna pulled her shawl tighter, but for the first time that evening, the cold seemed less bitter. She didn't know what waited for her at the end of this walk, but anything seemed better than what she was leaving behind. The man beside her had paid good money for her, yet he treated her with more dignity in these few minutes than she'd known in years. As they passed the last building on the edge of town, the open prairie stretched before them, painted in shades of winter brown and white. The wind carried the lonely cry of a distant coyote. Anna squared her shoulders and kept walking, matching Ethan Ward's steady pace step for step. Whatever lay ahead, she was walking toward it as a person, not property. And that made all the difference in the world. The sorrel horse plodded steadily through the deepening snow, its hooves breaking through the crusted surface with rhythmic crunches. Anna sat sideways on the saddle, her hands clutching the worn leather horn. Each step sent shivers through her body, unused to such exposure to the bitter winter air. The sun hung low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the endless white prairie. Ethan walked beside the horse, one hand on the reins, his boots leaving deep prints in the fresh powder. He'd insisted Anna ride while he walked, though she'd tried to protest. Now, watching his steady stride through the drifts, she wondered if she should try arguing again. Her discomfort seemed a small thing compared to his effort. The wind picked up, cutting through Anna's thin shawl like knives. She couldn't stop her teeth from chattering, though she tried to hide it by pressing her lips together. The sound carried in the crisp air anyway. Ethan glanced up at her, his weathered face unreadable in the fading light. Without a word, he stopped the horse and shrugged out of his heavy coat. The leather was cracked with age but lined with wool, warm from his body heat as he held it up to her. "Take it," he said simply. Anna hesitated, looking at his cotton shirt. "But you'll freeze." "I'm used to it." His voice was gruff but not unkind. "Walking keeps me warm enough." The coat settled over her shoulders like a blanket, carrying the scents of leather, tobacco, and horse. Anna pulled it close, grateful for its protection against the wind. "Thank you," she whispered. Ethan just nodded and started walking again, leading the horse through the growing darkness. The only sounds were the whisper of wind through the sage, the crunch of snow, and the occasional snort from the horse. As night fell completely, Ethan led them to a small grove of cottonwoods. The trees offered some shelter from the wind, their bare branches creaking softly overhead. "We'll camp here," he said, helping Anna down from the saddle. Her legs felt stiff and weak from the long ride. Working efficiently, Ethan gathered dried branches and soon had a small fire crackling in a cleared patch of ground. The flames cast dancing shadows on the snow around them. He unsaddled the horse, rubbing it down with handfuls of dry grass before setting it to graze on what it could find. Anna stood awkwardly by the fire, still wearing his coat, unsure what to do with herself. She watched as Ethan pulled supplies from his saddlebags: a small pot, a packet of beans, a battered coffee pot. His movements were practiced, speaking of countless nights spent alone in the open. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a fallen log he'd brushed clear of snow. No sense standing there getting cold. She settled onto the log, grateful to rest her aching legs. The fire's warmth reached out to her, and she held her hands toward the flames. Ethan worked in silence, setting the beans to cook and preparing coffee with the ease of long habit. When the simple meal was ready, he handed her a tin cup of beans and another of strong black coffee. The beans were plain, seasoned only with salt, but they were hot and filling. Anna couldn't remember the last time she'd had a proper meal. They ate in silence for a while, the fire popping and hissing between them. Finally, Anna gathered her courage to ask the question that had been burning in her mind since they'd left town. "Mr. Ward," she began hesitantly, "why did you do it? Spend your winter savings on me, I mean." Ethan stared into his coffee cup for a long moment before answering. "Wasn't looking for a wife, if that's what you're worried about. Don't want a servant neither." "Then why?" Her voice was small against the vastness of the night. "If you don't have any place for me, why spend so much?" The fire crackled, sending sparks spinning up toward the star-filled sky. Ethan's face was shadowed, making his expression hard to read. "Couldn't just stand there," he said finally, "watching that spectacle. Weren't right treating any human being that way? But your savings? Money's just money." He poked at the fire with a stick, sending up another shower of sparks. "Conscience wouldn't have let me sleep, knowing I could have helped and didn't." Anna wrapped her hands tighter around her coffee cup, feeling the warmth seep into her cold fingers. What will happen to me now?" "Don't rightly know," Ethan admitted. "Didn't think that far ahead. But you'll have a roof over your head and food to eat while we figure it out. That's something, at least." The honesty in his voice was somehow more comforting than false promises would have been. Anna nodded, sipping her coffee and letting the silence settle between them again. The night grew deeper, and eventually Ethan showed her how to make a bed from blankets near the fire. He took first watch, his figure a solid presence in the darkness as Anna drifted into an exhausted sleep. Morning came with frost crystallizing on every branch and blade of grass. Anna woke to find Ethan already up, adding wood to the rekindled fire. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air, mixing with the crisp scent of winter. She was just helping to pack up their simple camp when hoofbeats approached through the trees. Ethan's hand went to his gun, but relaxed as a rider emerged from the morning mist. The man sat tall on a paint horse, his dark hair bound back with a leather strip. His clothing was a mixture of native and settler styles, buckskin jacket over cotton shirt, wool pants tucked into moccasins. "Henry," Ethan greeted him with a nod. "Didn't expect to see you out this way." The Apache scout dismounted smoothly, his movements careful and deliberate. His eyes took in Anna's presence without comment before turning back to Ethan. "Brought news, friend. Not good news." Anna retreated toward the cabin's door but stayed close enough to hear. The morning air carried their voices clearly. "Railroad surveyors were in town yesterday," Henry continued. "They're marking lines through this valley, through your land." Ethan's face hardened. "They can't do that. This is my property." "They say your deed filing is incomplete." Henry's voice was calm but carried concern. "You have 1 week to file proper papers in town, or they claim right of way." "Damn their eyes," Ethan spat into. Dawn crept through the frost-covered windows of Ethan's cabin, painting the rough wooden walls in pale winter light. Anna stood near the stone fireplace, watching as Ethan worked at the heavy wooden table, his weathered hands moving methodically over worn leather reins and bridle straps. The familiar scents of leather oil and wood smoke filled the small space. The silence felt heavy, broken only by the occasional crackle of the fire and the soft creak of leather as Ethan worked. Anna's fingers twisted in her apron, her heart pounding as she gathered her courage. The morning light caught the coins still scattered on the table's corner, Ethan's depleted winter savings, and strengthened her resolve. "Mr. Ward," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. When he looked up, she forced herself to continue. I can work. I can earn my keep." Ethan's hand stilled on the leather. His eyes, sharp beneath graying brows, studied her carefully. "Ranch work ain't easy, girl. Takes strength." Anna straightened her shoulders, though her voice trembled. "If I can't prove my worth, then you've wasted your money on me." She gestured to the coins. "Please, let me try." Ethan set down the bridle he'd been mending, considering her words. The silence stretched until Anna thought she might break from it. Finally, he gave a short nod. "Reckon you deserve that much, at least." Relief weakened Anna's knees, but she stayed standing tall. "What should I do first?" "Start with kindling." He pointed to a pile of wood near the door. "We'll need it split fine for the fire." Anna nodded eagerly and moved to the woodpile. The axe lying beside it looked intimidating, its handle smooth from years of use. She lifted it carefully, testing its weight. "Not that one," Ethan said, moving to her side. He reached past her for a smaller hatchet. "Start with this. Grip it here, like so." His calloused hands positioned hers on the handle. "Keep your fingers clear of the blade path." The morning passed in a blur of new tasks. Anna's arms ached from splitting kindling, but she refused to complain. When Ethan deemed she had enough wood prepared, he showed her how to tend the stew bubbling in the iron pot over the fire. The rich smell of beef and vegetables filled the cabin as she carefully stirred the thick mixture. "Don't let it stick," he instructed, watching as she worked the heavy wooden spoon through the stew. "Scrape the bottom regular-like." Anna nodded, concentrating on the circular motion he'd shown her. Her arms trembled from the morning's work with the hatchet, but she kept stirring. The familiar task of cooking helped settle her nerves. In the afternoon, Ethan brought her one of his shirts, pointing to a tear along the sleeve. "Can you mend this?" Anna's face brightened. "Yes, sir, I can sew." She took the shirt carefully, examining the torn seam. "Do you have needle and thread?" He produced a small tin that had seen better days. Inside, she found a tangle of various threads and several needles stuck through a scrap of wool. Selecting a sturdy thread that matched the shirt's faded blue, Anna settled near the window where the light was best. Her stitches were small and even, years of practice showing in their neat precision. She could feel Ethan watching as she worked, but kept her eyes on the task. When she finished, she held up the shirt for his inspection. He examined the mended seam closely, then nodded. "Good work." The simple praise warmed Anna more than the fire ever could. As evening approached, Ethan began gathering supplies for his journey to town. Anna watched him check his saddlebags, her heart growing heavy at the thought of being left alone. The cabin suddenly felt very remote, very isolated. "Mr. Ward," she ventured quietly, Might I come with you to town?" Ethan paused in his packing, shaking his head. "Trail's too harsh this time of year. Better you stay here where it's warm." He must have seen the fear flash across her face, for his voice softened slightly. "Henry will check on you while I'm gone. You'll be safe enough." Anna nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. Of course he wouldn't want her slowing him down on such an important journey. She turned back to preparing their supper, carefully ladling the rich stew into wooden bowls. They ate in comfortable silence, the lamp casting flickering shadows across the rough-hewn table. When the bowls were empty, Anna cleared them away and began washing up, wanting to show she could manage household tasks without instruction. As she worked, she bowed her head slightly, her lips moving in silent prayer. "Please, Lord," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "Help me prove my worth. Don't let me shame Mr. Ward's kindness. Show me how to be useful, how to earn my place here." The quiet words carried in the still cabin air. Anna didn't notice Ethan had stopped his packing until she looked up to find him watching her, something unreadable in his expression. For a moment, their eyes met across the lamp-lit space. Then he turned back to his tasks, but there was a new gentleness in his movements. Anna finished the dishes and dried her hands on her apron, wondering if she'd overstepped by praying so openly. But when Ethan spoke again, his voice had lost some of its gruffness. "You did good work today," he said, not looking up from his packing. "We'll find more ways to make you useful when I return." The words weren't exactly praise, but they carried promise. Anna felt something tight in her chest begin to loosen. She wasn't just a burden he'd taken on from pity, he was willing to give her a real chance. "Thank you, Mr. Ward," she said softly, meaning it with all her heart. He merely nodded, continuing his preparations for tomorrow's journey. But the silence between them had changed, becoming something more comfortable, more hopeful. Through the cabin's window, Stars began to appear in the darkening sky, bright and clear in the bitter winter night. Dawn painted the eastern sky in shades of crimson and gold, the sun rising like a red ember above the distant mountains. Frost coated every surface, making the world glitter as Anna followed Ethan out of the cabin into the crisp morning air. Their breath formed small clouds in the cold as they made their way to the small corral where 2 horses waited, stamping their hooves against the frozen ground. "Horses need water first thing," Ethan explained, leading Anna to the well. "Then we check their feed." Anna gripped the wooden bucket with both hands, her fingers already stiff from the cold. The rope creaked as she lowered it into the dark well. The splash echoed up from below, and she began the task of hauling it back up. The bucket, now full and heavy, seemed to fight her every inch of the way. Her arms trembled with the effort, muscles still sore from yesterday's work with the hatchet. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the cold air. The bucket caught briefly on the well's stone edge, threatening to spill, but Anna refused to let go. Setting her jaw, she adjusted her grip and pulled harder. Ethan stood back watching. His hands twitched once as if wanting to help, but he held himself still. There was something in the girl's face, a fierce determination that spoke of more than just hauling water. She was proving something to herself as much as to him. Finally, the bucket cleared the well's edge. Anna's arms shook as she carefully maneuvered it down, not spilling a drop. Pride flickered across her face before she ducked her head, already moving to make another trip. "That'll do for now," Ethan said, noting how she tried to hide her trembling hands. "Let's check their feed next." The morning passed in a rhythm of chores, measuring oats, mucking stalls, checking hooves for stones. Anna tackled each task without complaint, though her movements grew slower as the morning wore on. Around mid-morning, she excused herself to the cabin, saying she needed to tend the fire. When Ethan came in for the noon meal, rich aromas greeted him. Anna stood at the rough table, carefully cutting into a golden-brown loaf of cornbread. Steam rose from the fresh-baked surface, carrying the sweet scent of corn and honey. "Found some cornmeal in the pantry," she explained softly, not meeting his eyes. "My mama taught me her recipe before she passed. I remembered it best I could." Ethan accepted the warm piece she offered. The bread was light and sweet, with crispy edges just the way he preferred. He nodded as he chewed, watching color rise in Anna's cheeks at the silent approval. "Your mama taught you well," he said finally, reaching for another piece. Anna's smile, though quick and shy, transformed her entire face. The afternoon brought Henry, riding up just as the sun began its westward slide. He dismounted gracefully, his Apache heritage evident in his fluid movements. Anna had seen him briefly before, but now she studied him carefully as he and Ethan spoke in low voices near the corral. Henry's dark eyes were kind when they turned to her, his weather-lined face creasing in a gentle smile. "The cabin smells of good bread," he said. "Perhaps there might be enough for a hungry friend." Anna hurried to set out a fresh loaf along with the remaining stew she'd kept warm. The 3 gathered around the table as evening approached, lamplight casting warm shadows on the cabin walls. The meal was simple, but the company made it feel like a feast. Henry's quiet humor drew even Ethan out of his usual reserve. "You've found someone with spirit, my friend," he teased, gesturing to Anna with his spoon. "See how she tackles the work without fear?" Ethan brushed off the comment with a grunt, but Anna caught the faint smile that touched his lips. She ducked her head, warmth blooming in her chest at the praise from both men. After the meal, Henry bid them farewell, mounting his horse with practiced ease. "The night will be clear," he said, looking up at the emerging stars. "But the wolves are hungry this winter. Watch your stock well." Ethan nodded, then turned to Anna. "Come on, I'll show you how to secure the barn for night." They walked together through the deepening twilight. Their boots crunched on frozen grass as Ethan demonstrated the heavy wooden bar that secured the barn door. "Wolves are clever," he explained. "They'll test every weakness. This bar needs to sit just so, or they might nose it loose." Anna paid close attention, practicing the motion until she could set the bar correctly every time. Together, they made a final check of the stock. The horses nickered softly in greeting, their breath visible in the cold air. Through the barn's high window, stars glittered in a crystal-clear sky. Back in the cabin, Anna added wood to the fire while Ethan cleaned his rifle. The familiar tasks created a comfortable silence, broken only by the crack and pop of burning logs. Anna watched the flames dance, gathering courage to speak the thoughts that had been growing all day. "I used to dream of being a school teacher," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. The firelight cast shifting shadows across her face as she continued. "I loved learning, loved books, but folks said I was too plain, too simple to teach others." She twisted her hands in her skirt. "Said no one would want their children learning from someone like me." Ethan's hand stilled on the rifle. He studied the fire for a long moment before speaking. "Plainness don't measure a woman's worth," he said gruffly, "nor her ability to teach." He picked up his cleaning cloth again, but his next words carried the weight of conviction. "It's what's in here that matters." He tapped his chest once, then returned to his task. Anna blinked rapidly, feeling tears threaten, but these weren't tears of shame or hurt. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt something warm and bright flickering in her chest. Hope, she realized. Small and fragile as a candle flame, but hope nonetheless. She turned back to the fire, adding another log carefully to the glowing embers. The wood settled with a shower of sparks, each one a tiny star rising toward the chimney. Outside, a lone coyote called, its voice carrying clear and wild across the night-dark valley. But inside the cabin, Anna felt safer than she had in years. The next morning dawned crisp and bright. Anna woke early, her muscles aching from the previous day's work, but a sense of purpose drove her from the small cot Ethan had set up for her near the hearth. Through the frost-covered window, she could see him already out by the barn, his breath making clouds in the cold air. Anna pulled on her worn boots and wrapped herself in the thick shawl Ethan had found in an old trunk. The morning chill bit at her face as she stepped outside, heading toward the chicken coop where a few hardy hens scratched at the frozen ground. "Morning," Ethan nodded as she passed. "Feed's in the tin by the coop." Anna scooped the grain with careful hands, remembering how he'd shown her the day before. The chickens clucked and gathered around her feet, pecking eagerly at the scattered feed. Her first handful went wide, most of it landing beyond the chickens' reach. "Closer to their feet," Ethan called out, not unkindly. "They ain't gonna chase it across the yard." Anna adjusted her throw, and this time the grain landed right where the hens could reach it. A small victory, but it brought a smile to her face. The chickens' feathers gleamed copper and brown in the early light as they pecked contentedly at their breakfast. Next came Ethan's horse, a sturdy sorrel gelding named Buck. Anna approached the corral carefully, hay in her arms. The horse watched her with intelligent eyes, ears pricked forward in interest. "He won't bite," Ethan said, coming up beside her. "Buck's got more sense than most men I know." Anna reached out tentatively, letting Buck sniff her hand before attempting to feed him. The horse's whiskers tickled her palm as he lipped up the hay, making her giggle softly. Ethan's eyebrows rose at the sound. It was the first time he'd heard her laugh. The morning passed in a steady rhythm of chores. Anna struggled with the heavy water bucket again, but managed not to spill it this time. When she went to prepare the midday meal, though, distraction led to disaster. The smell of burning stew filled the cabin, making her eyes water as she rushed to pull the pot from the fire. "I'm sorry," she said quickly as Ethan came in, drawn by the smell. "I was trying to remember Mama's seasonings and forgot to watch the bottom." But instead of the harsh words she expected, Ethan merely shrugged. "Happens to everyone. Try adding a bit of water next time if it starts sticking." He scraped what he could salvage into bowls, eating without complaint. That afternoon, he showed her how to curry Buck's coat, demonstrating the proper strokes with the brush. "Long strokes following the direction of the hair," he explained, "helps bring up the oils that protect him from the cold." Anna copied his movements carefully, smiling when Buck leaned into the brush. "He likes it," she said softly. "That he does." Ethan watched her work for a moment. "You're getting better at this." The simple praise warmed her more than any fire could. As evening approached, they finished the barn chores together. The setting sun painted the snow-capped mountains gold and pink, a sight that still took Anna's breath away. Inside the cabin, she stirred up the fire while Ethan cleaned his rifle, a routine that had already become familiar in just a few days. The peaceful quiet reminded her of church services from her childhood, before her father had stopped attending. Without thinking, She began to hum softly, an old hymn her mother had loved. The melody grew stronger as memories flooded back, and soon she was singing the words in a clear, sweet voice. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. The familiar verses filled the cabin with warmth beyond what the fire could provide. Anna was so caught up in the memory that she didn't notice Ethan had stopped cleaning his rifle until the last note faded away. When she looked up, she saw him staring into the fire, his weathered face unusually soft in the flickering light. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, thinking she'd disturbed him. "I didn't mean to—" "No," he cut her off, his voice rough. "Don't apologize, it's just—" He cleared his throat. "Sarah, my wife, she used to sing that same hymn while she worked." He blinked rapidly, and Anna realized with a start that his eyes were moist with unshed tears. The silence stretched between them, heavy with shared grief and understanding. Then Ethan spoke again, barely above a whisper. Would you sing it again?" Anna's heart swelled with unexpected emotion. She began the hymn once more, her voice stronger this time. Ethan closed his eyes, letting the familiar melody wash over him. When she finished, he nodded once, unable to speak. Later, as they sat down to their evening meal, a fresh stew to replace the burned one, Anna passed Ethan the cornbread. "Thank you, Pa," she said automatically, then froze, horrified at her slip. The word hung in the air between them. Anna's face burned with embarrassment as she waited for him to correct her, to remind her that she was just a girl he'd rescued from a bad situation. Nothing more. But Ethan just looked at her for a long moment, something indefinable passing across his face. Then he nodded, a simple gesture that spoke volumes, and reached for the cornbread. "Thank you, girl," he said gruffly, but his voice held a warmth she'd never heard before. Outside, snow began to fall in thick, lazy flakes. They could hear it pattering softly against the cabin roof and windows, slowly erasing their tracks from the day's work. The world beyond their walls grew quiet and white, but inside, the fire crackled cheerfully, and the lamp cast a golden glow over their simple meal. Anna watched the snow through the window, feeling a deep sense of peace settle over her. For the first time since her mother's death, she felt truly safe, truly at home. The man across the table might not be her real father, but in just a few days, he'd shown her more kindness than she'd known in years. Ethan rose to add another log to the fire, his movements deliberate and careful. The flames leaped higher, sending shadows dancing across the walls. Outside, the snow continued to fall, binding them together in their shared warmth and survival, creating a cocoon of safety against the winter night. When Anna began humming again, softer this time, Ethan didn't try to hide the smile that touched his lips. The hymn rose and fell like a lullaby, weaving itself into the peaceful silence of their evening, a thread of grace connecting past to present, loss to hope, two wounded souls to the possibility of healing. The storm passed during the night, leaving the world hushed and white. Dawn revealed snow piled in deep drifts against the cabin walls, the morning sun casting long blue shadows across the pristine blanket. Icicles hung like crystal daggers from the eaves, catching the light. Ethan stood on the porch, coffee cup steaming in his hand as he surveyed his buried ranch. The barn roof sagged under its white burden, and the corral fence had nearly disappeared beneath the drifts. His breath clouded in the frigid air as he considered his options. "Time's running short," he muttered to himself. The railroad men wouldn't wait forever, and that deed needed filing. He'd delayed too long already, letting the storm pass. Inside the cabin, Anna was already up and moving, stoking the fire and setting water to boil for breakfast. The familiar sounds of her morning routine drifted through the door. The scrape of the poker against iron, the clink of the coffee pot, the soft humming that had become part of their mornings. Heavy hoofbeats crunched through the snow announcing Henry's arrival. The Apache scout sat easily on his pinto, looking completely at home despite the bitter cold. He dismounted with fluid grace, leading his horse to the relative shelter of the cabin's lee side. "Storm's past," Henry said, stamping snow from his boots before joining Ethan on the porch. "Trail to town will be rough but passable." Ethan nodded. "Reckon I'll head out today, can't put it off any longer." "Want company?" Henry offered, accepting the cup of coffee Anna brought out. "Thank you, little sister," he said with a gentle smile that made Anna duck her head shyly. "No need," Ethan replied. "One man can manage. Best you keep an eye on things here." Anna's voice came soft but determined from the doorway. "Take me with you." Both men turned to look at her. She stood straighter under their gaze, though her hands twisted nervously in her apron. "It's a hard ride," Ethan said, not unkindly. 2 days at least in this snow." "I've earned my keep this past week," Anna insisted. "I'm stronger than I look. And—" She hesitated, then lifted her chin. "I need to show them. I'm not what they think." Henry watched the exchange with interest, sipping his coffee. Ethan studied Anna's face, seeing not the frightened girl from the saloon yard, but someone who had indeed grown stronger. She'd worked without complaint, learned quickly, and showed more grit than he'd expected. "She has a warrior's heart," Henry observed quietly. "Sometimes the smallest seed grows the strongest tree." Ethan rubbed his jaw, considering. The trail would be rough, but Anna had proven herself capable of handling discomfort. And something in him rebelled at the thought of leaving her behind, as if doing so would undo the trust they'd built. "Very well," he said finally. "You can ride Buck. He's steady in deep snow." Anna's face lit up, but Ethan held up a warning hand. "Mind, this ain't gonna be pleasant. We'll be sleeping rough, and townfolk might not be kind." "I understand," she said solemnly. "Thank you for trusting me." They spent the morning preparing. Anna packed provisions while Ethan and Henry checked the horses' tack and discussed the best route given the snow conditions. By midday, they were ready to depart. Henry helped Anna mount Buck, adjusting the stirrups for her shorter legs. "Remember what I showed you about keeping your seat," he reminded her. "Let the horse do the work." Ethan swung up onto his pack horse, a sturdy bay mare. He'd chosen her for her sure-footedness in rough terrain. "Keep close," he instructed Anna. "Trails likely to be treacherous in places." They set out under a crystal-clear sky, the snow so bright it hurt their eyes. Their horses' hooves crunched rhythmically through the crust, breaking trail through drifts that sometimes reached their bellies. The cold bit at any exposed skin, and their breath froze in their scarves. Anna didn't complain, though Ethan could see her shoulders growing tense with the effort of staying mounted in the difficult conditions. When they stopped briefly to rest the horses, she climbed down stiffly but immediately began checking Buck's legs for snow buildup just as she'd been taught. "You're doing well," Ethan told her, and was rewarded with a proud smile. They made camp that evening in a sheltered gulch where steep walls blocked the worst of the wind. Ethan showed Anna how to tramp down the snow to make a dry spot for their bedrolls, while he gathered wood for a fire. The flames were small but welcome, pushing back the gathering darkness. Anna set about preparing their evening meal, working efficiently despite numbed fingers. She'd packed dried beans and salt pork, which she set to simmer in their single pot. The familiar task seemed to settle her, and soon she was humming softly as she worked. Ethan, tending to the horses, found himself pausing to listen. The simple melody floated on the evening air, mixing with the snap and pop of the fire and the occasional stamp of a horse's hoof. It made the cold camp feel almost homelike. "Beans are ready," Anna called softly. She handed him a tin plate, steam rising in the frigid air. Ethan took a bite and nodded approval. "Good as any I've had," he said honestly. "You've learned quick this past week." Anna ducked her head, pleased. "Mama always said cooking's just paying attention. Like most things, I reckon." "Your mama was right about that." Ethan studied her across the fire. "You've surprised me, girl. Didn't expect you'd take to ranch life so easy." "I like having purpose," Anna said quietly. "Before, well, nobody expected anything of me except to be a burden." "You're no burden," Ethan said firmly. "You've more than proved that." They fell silent, finishing their meal as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. The horses dozed, steam rising from their backs in the firelight. Anna wrapped herself in her blanket, but stayed awake, watching the flames dance. "What if," she started, then stopped. "Speak your mind," Ethan encouraged. "What if the townfolk treat me like before? What if they laugh?" Her voice was small but determined. "I don't want to shame you." Ethan's face hardened. "You listen here," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You walk beside me in town, head high. You've earned that right. Anyone who'd shame you will answer to me. Anna's eyes glistened in the firelight. Yes, sir. And Anna? She looked up at him. You've not shamed me once since you came. Don't you forget that? She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. They sat in comfortable silence until the fire burned low, then settled into their bedrolls. Despite the hard ground and cold air, Anna fell asleep with a smile, wrapped in the warmth of belonging. The next day dawned clear and cold. They broke camp efficiently, Anna working alongside Ethan as if they'd done this 100 times before. The horses were fresh after their rest, and the trail was easier as they descended toward the valley where Pine Ridge lay. As the afternoon wore on, they began to see signs of civilization. Fenced fields buried under snow, isolated cabins with smoke rising from their chimneys, wheel ruts partially filled with white. Anna grew quieter with each mile, her shoulders tense. When the first buildings of Pine Ridge came into view, Ethan called a halt. Anna looked at him questioningly. Remember what I said, he told her, his voice firm and sure. Walk beside me. You'll not be shamed while I'm alive. Anna straightened in her saddle, her chin lifting. Yes, Pa, she said, the word coming naturally now. Her heart steadied at his unwavering support. Together, they urged their horses forward towards whatever reception the town might offer. Anna's fear remained, but it was overshadowed by something stronger, the knowledge that she was no longer alone, no longer unwanted. She belonged somewhere now, to someone who saw her worth. The snow crunched beneath their horses' hooves as they rode on side by side toward Pine Ridge. Pine Ridge's main street hummed with midday activity despite the bitter winter chill. Horses stamped at hitching posts while townsfolk hurried between buildings, collars turned up against the wind. Smoke curled from chimneys, and the clang of the blacksmith's hammer rang out steadily from down the street. Ethan guided their horses to the rail outside the clerk's office, his expression grim. Wait here, he told Anna, gathering his deed papers from his saddlebag. Shouldn't take long. Anna nodded, trying to appear smaller as curious eyes turned their way. She focused on adjusting Buck's bridle, keeping her back to the boardwalk where whispers had already started. The memory of her last time in town, standing on that auction block, made her cheeks burn. Ain't that Sam Harlan's girl? Someone muttered. The one old Ward bought for whiskey money, another voice answered. Anna's hands trembled on the leather straps, but she remembered Ethan's words about holding her head high. She straightened her spine, though her heart hammered. Through the clerk's office window, she could see Ethan spreading papers on the counter, his weathered face serious as he spoke with the balding clerk. Minutes stretched like molasses in January. Anna counted her breaths, trying to stay calm. A group of young boys paused nearby, pointing and snickering, but she fixed her gaze on Buck's patient brown eye instead. The horse nickered softly, bumping her shoulder in comfort. The clerk's voice suddenly rose, sharp enough to carry through the glass. Anna couldn't help glancing up. Ethan's shoulders had gone rigid, his hand clenched on the counter. Worry gnawed at her belly. Unable to bear the suspense, Anna crept closer to the office door, which stood slightly ajar against the stuffy interior. The clerk's reedy voice drifted out clearly now. No legal guardianship papers filed by Sam Harlan, the clerk was saying. According to county records, the girl is listed as an indentured ward of Mrs. Margaret Blackwood's home for young ladies in Copper Springs. Been so since her mother passed. What? Ethan's voice was dangerously quiet. Sam Harlan sold his own daughter when he had no right to her? Technically speaking, the clerk shuffled through more papers. The girl could be seized as a runaway from her rightful guardian. Mrs. Blackwood paid good money for that indenture contract. Anna's legs went weak. She steadied herself against the doorframe, bile rising in her throat. All this time, she'd belonged to some unknown woman in another county? Her father had sold her twice over? Heavy bootsteps approached from down the boardwalk. Sheriff Conley appeared, his star glinting dully in the winter light. He must have been listening, for his face wore a satisfied smirk as he stepped into the office. Thought I recognized that girl outside, Conley drawled. Been meaning to have words with you, Ward. Sam Harlan's been raising hell about you stealing his property. She ain't property, Ethan growled, and that drunk gave up any claim when he tried selling her for whiskey money. Way I hear it, he was just disciplining an unruly child. Conley hooked his thumbs in his gun belt. Now, Seems to me the simplest thing is to return her to her father until proper authorities from Copper Springs can collect her. Save everyone a heap of trouble. Anna's heart nearly stopped. Return to her father? After these precious days of dignity and purpose with Ethan, she must have made some small sound, for both men turned to see her standing in the doorway. Ethan's face softened with concern, but his voice remained steel-hard. No law on God's earth will send that girl back to Sam Harlan's fists in shame. That so? Conley's hand drifted to his revolver. You aiming to defy the law, Ward? Because harboring a runaway is a serious matter. Could cost a man his land, even get him jail time. Anna couldn't breathe. This was all her fault. Ethan would lose everything. His ranch, his freedom, because of her. She backed away from the door, bumping into people on the boardwalk in her haste to reach the horses. Anna! Ethan's voice cut through her panic. He emerged from the office, ignoring Conley's warning call. His strong hands gripped her shoulders, steadying her. Easy now. We'll sort this out. I'm so sorry, she whispered, tears threatening. I never meant to bring trouble on you. Ain't your doing, Ethan said firmly. He turned to glare at Conley. We're leaving town now. Anyone tries to take this girl, they'll answer to me. The sheriff's face darkened. That's not wise, Ward. Don't make me... You heard him. A new voice interrupted. Henry appeared from the alley beside the office, his quiet presence drawing all eyes. The girl stays with Ethan. Creator's law stands above man's law when it comes to protecting the innocent? Conley's lip curled. Keep out of this, Indian. Ain't your business? Any threat to my friends is my business, Henry replied calmly. To Ethan, he added, My cousin's cabin stands empty 2 miles north. You'll find welcome there tonight. Ethan nodded gratefully. Much obliged, brother. To Anna, he said, Mount up. Quick now. Anna scrambled onto Buck's back, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped the reins. Ethan swung up beside her on his bay, his face set in granite lines. This ain't over, Ward, Conley called as they turned their horses. That girl sets foot in Pine Ridge again. She'll be arrested sure as sunrise. They rode out of town at a controlled pace, though Anna could feel the tension thrumming through both horses and riders. Only when Pine Ridge disappeared behind a bend did Ethan release a long breath. Henry's cousin's place is just over that rise, he said, pointing to a snow-covered hill. We'll rest there, figure out our next move. The cabin proved to be a snug little structure tucked into a grove of pine trees. Henry had ridden ahead and already had a fire going in the hearth when they arrived. Anna moved through the evening tasks mechanically, caring for the horses, helping prepare a simple supper, but her mind spun with fear and guilt. She couldn't sleep that night despite the warm fire and soft bedroll Henry had provided. Every creak of the cabin's timbers made her start, imagining the sheriff's men coming to drag her away. Worse was the knowledge that she had brought this trouble on Ethan, who had shown her nothing but kindness. From her pallet near the hearth, Anna could hear the men's quiet voices as they discussed options. Henry mentioned Apache friends who could guide them to safety if needed. Ethan spoke of riding to Copper Springs to challenge the indenture contract legally. What that drunk did wasn't right. Ethan's voice was rough with anger. Selling his own flesh and blood twice over? Man deserves worse than jail. The law has many faces, Henry replied. Not all are just, but the girl has found her true family now with you. Fat lot of good that does her, with me wanted for harboring a runaway. The Creator puts certain souls in our path for a reason, Henry said. You saved her that day in town. Now she gives you reason to fight for something beyond mere survival. Anna turned her face into her blanket, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. She had thought she'd finally found a home, a place to belong. Now it was all falling apart because of legal papers she'd never even known existed. Sleep refused to come. As the fire burned low and the men's voices faded to silence, Anna lay awake, her mind churning with guilt and fear. The warmth and purpose she'd found with Ethan seemed to be slipping away like snow melting in the sun. She had ruined everything simply by existing, by being a burden, just as her father had always said. The cabin's timbers creaked in the winter wind, and somewhere in the darkness, a coyote called mournfully. Anna pulled her blanket tighter, praying for guidance, for some way to protect Ethan from the trouble she'd brought to his door. But no answers came in the long, cold hours before dawn. The pale winter dawn crept through the cabin's single window, casting long shadows across the rough-hewn floor. Ethan stirred from his restless sleep, his mind already churning with plans. He'd spent half the night remembering the town preacher's disapproving looks whenever Sam Harlan stumbled drunk through Sunday service. Surely the man would speak against returning Anna to such cruelty. "Henry," he called softly, not wanting to wake Anna. "Reckon Preacher Matthews might help us? He's seen how that drunk treated her." Henry rose from his bedroll, nodding thoughtfully. "A man of God should stand for what's right. But we'll need more than words to fight the law." "The boarding house contract can't be legal," Ethan insisted. "No father has the right to sell his child twice over." He grabbed the water bucket, heading to the door. "I'll fetch fresh water, then we can—" The words died in his throat. Anna's blanket lay neatly folded by the cold hearth, her few belongings gone. Boot prints in the fresh snow led away from the cabin and into the steel-gray morning. "Damn!" The curse burst from him before he could stop it. "She's run off!" Henry appeared at his shoulder, studying the tracks with grave eyes. "She believes she brings you trouble, so she removes herself." "Fool girl," Ethan growled, but his voice cracked with worry. "She'll freeze out there alone." "Then we ride," Henry said simply, already moving to saddle the horses. "The snow is deep. She cannot have gone far." Ethan's hands shook as he prepared his mount, cursing himself for not foreseeing this. Of course Anna would try to protect him. Hadn't she spent her whole life being told she was nothing but a burden? Miles away, Anna pushed through knee-deep snow, her legs burning with effort. The bitter wind cut through her thin shawl, but she forced herself onward. Each step carried her further from the warmth and belonging she'd found with Ethan, but she couldn't bear to be the cause of his ruin. "Please, Lord," she whispered, her breath forming ice crystals in the air. "Keep him safe. Let him keep his land. I'm not worth the trouble I bring him." Tears leaked from her eyes, freezing on her cheeks before she could wipe them away. She had no real plan, no destination in mind. She only knew she had to get far enough away that Ethan wouldn't be tempted to protect her anymore. A wolf's howl echoed across the snow-covered hills, closer than she'd like. Anna quickened her pace, though her legs trembled with exhaustion. The sound came again, answered by another wolf further east. They were hunting. Fear drove her toward a stand of pine trees, their branches heavy with snow. At least there she might find some shelter from the wind. Her feet had gone numb hours ago, and her fingers could barely grip her shawl. Back at the cabin, Ethan and Henry mounted up, their horses snorting clouds of steam in the cold air. Henry studied the tracks intently, reading signs Ethan could barely see. "She heads east," Henry announced, "but her path wanders. She has no clear destination." "Just trying to get away from me," Ethan said bitterly. "After everything, she still thinks she's worthless." "No." Henry's voice was gentle but firm. "She thinks you are worth protecting. There is a difference." They urged their horses through the deep snow, following Anna's increasingly erratic trail. The wind picked up, making tracking harder as loose snow began filling in her footprints. "How long ago did she leave?" Ethan asked, scanning the white landscape desperately. "Before dawn," Henry replied. "Perhaps 4 hours. But she moves slowly in such deep snow." Ethan's heart pounded. 4 hours in this cold with no proper coat or supplies? The girl was strong, but even the hardiest settler could succumb to winter's bite. "We'll find her," Henry said, reading his friend's fear. "The Creator did not bring her to you only to lose her now." They rode on, the horses struggling through drifts that sometimes reached their bellies. Ethan's hands were stiff with cold despite his heavy gloves. How much worse must it be for Anna? The wolves howled again, making both horses dance nervously. Henry raised his head, listening intently. "They hunt to the east," he said, "where the girl's tracks lead." Ethan drew his rifle from its scabbard, checking that it was loaded. "Then we'd best hurry." Under the pines, Anna huddled against a thick trunk, trying to still her trembling. The branches provided some shelter from the wind, but the cold seemed to seep up from the very ground, stealing what little warmth remained in her body. She could no longer feel her feet at all, and her hands had turned an alarming shade of blue. Even through her numbed fingers, she could feel how the coins in her pocket had turned to ice. The few dollars she'd saved from her work at the ranch, she'd left them behind for Ethan, hoping they might help with his land trouble. "I'm sorry," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was apologizing to Ethan or to God. I only wanted to belong somewhere, to be worth something. The wolves called again, much closer now. Anna tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. Darkness crept at the edges of her vision. She knew she should keep moving, find better shelter, but exhaustion dragged at her like chains. Just a small rest, she murmured, her words slurring slightly. Just need to catch my breath. Her head drooped forward as the cold worked its quiet magic, making her forget to be afraid. Through half-closed eyes, she watched snowflakes drift between the pine boughs, dancing like feathers in the fading light. Somewhere in the distance, she thought she heard hoofbeats, but that must be her imagination. No one would be foolish enough to ride in such weather. No one would come looking for her at all. Ethan and Henry pushed their horses hard despite the treacherous footing. The wolf calls grew more frequent, moving in a pattern that made Henry's face grow grave. They circle something, he said, or someone. Anna, Ethan shouted into the wind. Anna, where are you? His voice echoed across the snow-covered landscape, but no answer came. The tracks they followed grew increasingly unsteady, weaving back and forth as if the walker was struggling to keep a straight line. There, Henry pointed to a grove of pines ahead. The tracks lead there. They urged their horses forward, breaking through deep drifts. As they drew closer, Ethan's sharp eyes caught a flash of movement, a gray shape slinking between the trees. He fired a warning shot into the air, the rifle's crack echoing off the hills. Several wolves scattered from the pine grove, their rangy forms disappearing into the gathering dusk. Anna! Ethan leaped from his horse, plunging through the snow toward the trees. Answer me, girl. He found her slumped against a massive pine trunk, her face pale as the snow around her. For one horrible moment, he thought they were too late. Then she stirred slightly, her eyes fluttering open. Ethan, she whispered, you shouldn't have come. Hush now. He shrugged off his heavy coat, wrapping it around her frozen form. Of course I came. You're my girl. Henry appeared beside them, already gathering dry branches for a fire. We must warm her slowly, he warned. Too much heat too fast could harm her. Ethan gathered Anna into his arms, alarmed at how cold she felt. What were you thinking, running off like that? You could have died out here. Better that, Anna mumbled, than seeing you lose everything because of me. Listen close, Ethan's voice was rough with emotion. Nothing I own, not land, not cattle, not my own freedom, is worth more than your life. You understand me? Tears leaked from Anna's eyes as Henry got the fire started, its warmth beginning to thaw her frozen cheeks. But the sheriff, the law, we'll fight it, Ethan said firmly. Together, no more running, no more shame. You're my daughter now, whether the law likes it or not. Henry nodded approvingly as he helped wrap Anna in warm blankets from their saddlebags. The Creator knows whose child you truly are, he told her. Man's laws cannot change that. As feeling painfully returned to her limbs, Anna looked up at Ethan through tear-blurred eyes. You really want to keep me? Even with all this trouble? Ain't trouble, Ethan said gruffly, though his own eyes were suspiciously bright. It's family, and family's worth fighting for. The fire crackled, pushing back the gathering darkness. Wolves howled in the distance, but they wouldn't dare approach the flames. Anna slowly stopped shivering as warmth and hope seeped back into her frozen body. Night crept across the snow-laden landscape as Ethan and Henry pressed deeper into the wilderness. The storm had strengthened, thick flakes swirling in the bitter wind. Their horses plodded forward, heads low against the growing darkness. The lantern swinging from Ethan's saddle horn cast dancing shadows across the endless white. Henry pulled his horse alongside Ethan's, studying his friend's face in the wavering light. The Apache scout had known Ethan long enough to read the fear etched in the rancher's weathered features. The tracks grow faint, Henry said, gesturing at the snow-filled prints they followed. But the girl's spirit is strong. Ethan's jaw clenched. Strong ain't enough against this cold. We have to find her soon. You saved her once, Henry said quietly, with money in that saloon yard. Now you must save her again. With love. The words hung in the frozen air between them. Ethan's hands tightened on his reins, but he said nothing. The silence spoke volumes about the change in his heart since that day he'd first seen Anna on the auction block. She believes she is protecting you, Henry continued, from the sheriff, from trouble with the law. But a father's love is stronger than any law written by men. I ain't her father, Ethan muttered, but the words lacked conviction. Henry's dark eyes were knowing. The Creator puts children in our path when we need them most. You saved her body that day in town. Now her soul needs saving, from the demons that whisper she has no worth. The wind howled through the pines, drowning out Ethan's response, but his expression softened as he remembered Anna's quiet determination these past weeks. Her careful attention to chores, her sweet hymn-singing in the evenings, the way she'd called him Pa without thinking. The horses suddenly lifted their heads, ears pricking forward. Henry raised a hand, pointing to a cluster of pines ahead. There, something moves in the shadows. Ethan squinted through the swirling snow. The lantern light caught something dark huddled against a massive trunk. His heart lurched as he recognized the shape of Anna's shawl. Anna! He spurred his horse forward, practically leaping from the saddle before it fully stopped. She lay crumpled at the base of the pine, her lips tinged blue, skin pale as the snow around her. For one terrible moment, Ethan feared they were too late. Then he saw her chest rise with a shallow breath. Lord, she murmured, her voice barely a whisper, let me be worth saving. You foolish, precious girl. Ethan yanked off his heavy coat, wrapping it around her frozen form. He gathered her against his chest, his own body heat seeping through the layers of wool. You're already worth saving. You always were. Henry quickly dismounted, gathering dead branches from beneath the snow. His skilled hands soon had a small fire crackling, pushing back the darkness. The flames cast warmth across Anna's face as Ethan held her close. You're my family now, Ethan whispered fiercely into her frost-matted hair. You hear me? My family. And I ain't letting you go again. Anna stirred weakly in his arms, her eyelids fluttering. But the sheriff... Damn the sheriff, Ethan growled, and damn anyone else who'd try to take you. I'll fight the whole territory if I have to. Henry added more wood to the fire, nodding approval. The law of the heart is stronger than paper laws. The Creator knows where she belongs. Through the long night, they took turns keeping watch. Ethan refused to relinquish Anna from his arms, letting his body warmth slowly bring life back to her frozen limbs. Henry maintained the fire, brewing strong coffee in his battered tin pot, forcing Anna to sip whenever she stirred. The wind gradually died as midnight passed. Stars emerged between breaks in the clouds, their cold light reflecting off the new-fallen snow. Wolves called in the distance, but they wouldn't dare approach the fire's protective circle. Ethan studied Anna's face in the flickering light, seeing past the roundness that had earned her so much cruel mockery. He saw instead her gentle spirit, her quiet strength, her desperate desire to belong. How would he not recognize sooner that she filled the empty spaces in his heart? I remember when my Sarah died, he said softly to Henry across the fire. Thought I'd never want family again. Too much pain in losing them. Henry's eyes were understanding. And now? Now I reckon some pain's worth risking. Ethan adjusted the blanket around Anna's shoulders. Some loves are worth fighting for. The night crept toward dawn. Anna's color slowly improved, though she still shivered occasionally. Ethan kept up a quiet stream of talk, telling her about the spring calving to come, the repairs needed on the barn, all the future days they would share. As the eastern sky began to pale, Anna stirred more strongly. Her eyes opened, focusing on Ethan's face above her. Pa? She whispered. Ethan's throat tightened. He clasped her cold hand in his warm one, squeezing gently. I'm here, girl, and I ain't going anywhere. I'm sorry, she murmured. I thought I was only causing trouble. Hush now. Ethan's voice was gruff with emotion. Only trouble was me being too stubborn to say what needed saying. You're my daughter now, if you'll have me for a father. Tears leaked from Anna's eyes, freezing on her cheeks. You really want me? Even with everything. Even with everything, Ethan confirmed. We'll face it together, the sheriff, the law, whatever comes. You ain't alone anymore. Henry stirred the fire, adding fresh wood as dawn's first light touched the snowy peaks. The sun returns, he said quietly. A new day begins. The past is covered by fresh snow, like the Creator's clean page. Anna managed to sit up slightly, though she kept Ethan's coat wrapped tight around her. Color had returned to her face, and her eyes were clear now as she looked between the two men who had risked the storm to find her. I was so cold, she whispered, so afraid, but I kept thinking of home. of the ranch, of the fire in the hearth. That's where we're heading soon as you're strong enough, Ethan said. Back home where you belong. Home. The word seemed to warm Anna more than the fire. She leaned against Ethan's shoulder, no longer afraid to accept the comfort he offered. Henry smiled, seeing the healing that had begun in both their hearts. The sun rose fully, turning the snow-covered landscape to diamond brilliance. But the real light came from within their small circle, the light of family found, of love freely given, of belonging finally claimed. Ethan kept his arm around Anna's shoulders, his expression softened by newfound purpose. He had saved her first with money, yes, but this second saving, with a father's fierce love, would last forever. The winter sun hung high overhead as three riders made their slow way back toward Pine Ridge. Ethan kept his arms wrapped protectively around Anna, who sat bundled in layers of blankets before him on the saddle. Though the morning's brightness had burned away some of the chill, the air still bit sharp and cold. Henry rode slightly ahead, his keen eyes scanning the snow-covered trail. Every so often he would glance back to check on Anna, nodding with satisfaction at the color returning to her cheeks. The town's just beyond that ridge, Henry said, reining his horse to a stop. But perhaps we should visit the parsonage first. He turned in his saddle to face Ethan. Reverend Matthews is a man of honor. His word carries weight with townsfolk and law alike. Ethan considered this, looking down at Anna's tired face. She needed rest and warmth, but Henry's suggestion made sense. They needed allies in this fight, and few commanded more respect than the preacher. "What do you think, girl?" Ethan asked softly. "Strong enough to make one more stop?" Anna nodded against his chest. "Yes, Pa." The word came easier now, natural as breathing. "I remember the Reverend being kind, even when others weren't." The parsonage sat on the outskirts of town, a modest, white-painted structure with smoke curling from its chimney. A neat stack of split wood lined one wall, and despite the winter, the windows glowed with welcoming warmth. Henry dismounted first, striding to the door while Ethan carefully helped Anna down from the saddle. Her legs trembled slightly, but she managed to stand with his support. The door opened before Henry could knock, spilling lamplight onto the snow. Reverend Matthews stood in the doorway, his silver hair catching the light. His kind eyes took in the scene quickly. Henry's grave expression, Ethan's protective stance, and Anna's exhausted but determined face. Come in," he said, stepping back. "You all look half frozen." "Martha," he called to his wife, "put the kettle on if you would. We have guests in need of warming." Inside the parsonage was simple but comfortable. A pot-bellied stove radiated heat from one corner, and worn but clean rugs covered the plank floors. Mrs. Matthews, a plump woman with rosy cheeks, hurried to help Anna out of her snow-dampened wraps. "You poor dear," she clucked, leading Anna to a chair near the stove. "Let's get you warmed through properly." While his wife tended to Anna, Reverend Matthews gestured for Ethan and Henry to sit at the sturdy table. "Now then," he said, settling into his own chair. "I suspect this isn't merely a social call." Ethan's weathered hands clasped together on the table as he began to speak. His voice was low but clear as he recounted everything. The day at the saloon, Anna's growth at the ranch, and now the legal tangle threatening to tear apart their newfound family. The Reverend listened intently, his expression growing grave. When Ethan mentioned Sheriff Conley's threats, Matthews shook his head. "That man puts law before justice far too often," he murmured. "Can you help us?" Ethan asked directly. "Your word carries weight. You've seen how that drunk treated her." "Indeed I have," Matthews said, his gentle face hardening at the memory. "Sam Harlan's cruelty to that child has been an open shame in this town far too long. And that business about some boarding house having legal claim?" He shook his head. "Seems mighty convenient timing, if you ask me." Mrs. Matthews brought coffee for the men and tea for Anna, who had begun to doze in her chair by the stove. The woman draped another blanket over the girl's shoulders before joining them at the table. "That child needs a real home," she said firmly. "Anyone with eyes can see she's found one with you, Mr. Ward." Ethan's throat tightened at her words. He looked over at Anna's sleeping form, marveling at how completely she'd worked her way into his heart in such a short time. "I can help," Reverend Matthews said after a thoughtful silence. "I'll draft an affidavit testifying to the abuse I've witnessed. Moreover, I'll state that I've observed the positive change in Anna since she's been in your care." He leaned forward earnestly. "The law may be concerned with papers and procedures, but no decent judge can ignore the obvious truth. That girl has found her true father in you." Henry nodded approval. "The Creator's law stands above man's law," he said quietly. "Family is more than blood." Throughout the afternoon, Matthews worked at his desk, carefully crafting the legal document. His wife insisted Anna rest on a cot near the stove, bringing her soup and cornbread when she woke. Ethan sat nearby, discussing options with the others in low voices. "We'll need to file a formal petition for guardianship," Matthews explained, dipping his pen in ink. "But my testimony about Sam's unfitness as a father will carry significant weight. And if this mysterious boarding house claim surfaces, we can challenge it. No one has produced actual documentation yet." "What if they do?" Ethan asked, his voice rough with worry. "Then we fight it," the Reverend said simply. "The court must consider the child's welfare above all. Anna is nearly 16, old enough for her own wishes to be heard, and any judge can see she's thriving in your care." Anna stirred on her cot, catching fragments of their conversation. Her heart swelled as she heard Ethan speak. "She's my daughter," he said with such unguarded pride that tears sprang to her eyes. "Maybe not by birth, but by choice, by love, and I aim to protect her with everything I have." The tears slipped silently down Anna's cheeks, but these were different from all the tears she'd shed before. These were tears of gratitude, of belonging, of finally finding her place in the world. She closed her eyes, offering silent prayers of thanks as the men's voices continued their quiet discussion. Through the afternoon and into early evening, Ethan kept watch over her. Sometimes he would rest his calloused hand on her shoulder, as if reassuring himself she was really there, really safe. Each touch seemed to say what words couldn't. "You're home now. You're family. You're loved." The preacher's quill scratched steadily across paper as he crafted the affidavit. His wife brought more coffee, and eventually lit the lamps as darkness gathered outside. Henry added wood to the stove when needed, his quiet presence a comfort to them all. Anna drifted between sleep and waking, wrapped in warmth and security she'd never known before. Each time she opened her eyes, she found Ethan still there, still watching over her. Once she caught him praying softly, his words nearly lost in the crackle of the stove. "Thank you, Lord, for leading her to me. Help me be the father she deserves." She closed her eyes again, her heart too full for words. The past weeks had taught her that love could grow in the harshest soil, that family could be found in the most unexpected places. Here, in the parsonage's warmth, surrounded by people who cared for her well-being, Anna felt the last of her doubts melting away like snow in spring sunshine. The Reverend's pen made its final flourish across the paper. "There," he said with satisfaction. "A proper legal declaration, witnessed and sealed. It won't solve everything, but it's a strong first step." "Much obliged," Ethan said quietly, still keeping his vigil by Anna's cot. "Reckon we're in your debt." Matthews waved this away. "No debt between friends," besides he smiled. "Watching love heal old wounds is payment enough for any minister's services." Mrs. Matthews wrapped some leftover cornbread in a clean cloth, pressing it into Henry's hands. "For your journey home tomorrow," she insisted. "That child needs feeding up." Anna wasn't asleep, but she kept her eyes closed, treasuring these moments of quiet care. She'd spent so many years believing she wasn't worth saving, wasn't worth loving. Now every gentle word, every kind gesture, helped wash away those old hurts. Ethan's hand rested on her shoulder again, and she heard the smile in his voice as he spoke to the others. "Never thought I'd have family again after Sarah died. Figured that part of my life was over." He paused. "But the Lord has His own ways of filling empty places in a man's heart." Dawn painted the eastern sky in stripes of pink and gold as Ethan, Henry, and Anna made their way down Pine Ridge's main street. The morning air held a crisp bite, and frost glittered on the weathered boardwalks. Anna walked between the two men, her back straight despite her trembling hands. Townsfolk were already gathering outside the clerk's office, drawn by the promise of drama. Their whispers followed Anna like dry leaves scratching across wooden planks. She kept her eyes forward, though her cheeks burned at their stares. "Hold your head high," Ethan murmured. "You've nothing to be ashamed of." Sheriff Conley stood at the bottom of the clerk's office steps, thumbs hooked in his gun belt. His stern face showed no emotion as they approached. Beside him, Sam Harlan swayed slightly, reeking of stale whiskey even at this early hour. His bloodshot eyes fixed on Anna with naked contempt. "So the useless girl comes crawling back?" Sam sneered, his words slurring. "Thought you could run away from your own blood, did you?" Ethan's hand tightened on Anna's shoulder, but before he could speak, Henry stepped forward. The Apache's calm presence commanded attention from the growing crowd. "The only blood that matters," Henry said clearly, "is the blood a father would shed protecting his child." His dark eyes bored into Sam. "You shed nothing but her tears." A murmur rippled through the onlookers. Sam's face twisted, but the sheriff's warning glance kept him silent. Reverend Matthews appeared at the top of the steps, his Bible tucked under one arm and a leather folder in his other hand. "The clerk is ready," he announced. "Let's proceed with dignity, if you please." Inside, the clerk's office smelled of dust and old paper. Morning light streamed through tall windows, catching motes in its beams. The clerk, Mr. Peterson, sat behind his massive desk, round spectacles perched on his nose as he arranged documents before him. "This is an unusual case," Peterson began, his voice properly official. "We're here to determine the legal status and guardianship of one Anna Harlan." He peered at Anna over his spectacles. "Young lady, please step forward." Anna moved to stand before the desk, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. Her cotton dress, freshly pressed by Mrs. Matthews the night before, suddenly felt too tight around her throat. "Now then," Peterson continued, "I have here a claim that you are legally bound as an indentured ward to the Riverside boarding house in Clear Creek County. However," he shuffled through his papers, "no documentation of this arrangement has been produced. Reverend Matthews, you have testimony to present?" The preacher stepped forward, opening his leather folder. "I do indeed, sir." He placed his carefully drafted affidavit on the desk. "This details multiple instances of abuse and neglect I personally witnessed over the past 3 years. Sam Harlan repeatedly denied his daughter basic necessities, education, and dignity." Sam lurched forward, face flushed. "That's lies. She was fed, wasn't she? Had a roof, didn't she? Ungrateful little—" "Mr. Harlan," the clerk cut in sharply, "you will maintain order or be removed." He turned to Henry. "The Apache scout Henry has also asked to speak. The territory recognizes your status as a trusted interpreter and witness. Please proceed." Henry moved with quiet grace to face the clerk. "I have seen this man strike his daughter," he said, each word measured and clear. "I have seen her sleeping in barns when he spent housing money on whiskey. I have seen her bear shame that was not hers to carry." He gestured to Ethan. "But I have also seen her bloom like spring flowers under true father's care. The Great Spirit knows which man deserves to raise this child." The crowd pressed closer to the windows now, straining to hear. Anna felt their presence like a physical weight, but she forced herself to stand tall. Ethan's steady presence behind her gave her strength. "What of this boarding house claim?" Peterson asked, frowning at his papers. "If I may," Reverend Matthews interjected. "I've made inquiries. The Riverside boarding house burned down 2 years ago. Its owner, Mrs. Kendrick, passed away shortly after. Any supposed claim would have died with her re." Sam Harlan's face twisted. "She still belongs to me, my own flesh and blood." "Flesh and blood?" Ethan's voice cut through the room like a steel blade. "You sold her for whiskey money, tried to auction her like cattle in the saloon yard." His weathered face was hard as granite. "A father protects. A father builds up instead of tearing down. A father loves." Anna's vision blurred with tears, but she blinked them back. She would not cry. Not now. The clerk studied the affidavit carefully, then looked up at Sam Harlan. "Would you care to present any evidence of your fitness as a father?" Sam staggered forward, jabbing a finger toward Anna. "Don't need evidence. She's mine. These high and mighty folks think they're better than me, but they ain't. That fat, useless girl." "That's enough." Peterson's hand slammed flat on his desk. "Your conduct in this very room proves Reverend Matthews's testimony. You are clearly intoxicated at your own daughter's guardianship hearing." He turned to Anna, his voice gentling. "Young lady, you are nearly 16. The law permits consideration of your wishes at this age. What do you want?" Anna felt the moment stretch like pulled taffy. All her life, no one had asked what she wanted. She took a deep breath and spoke from her heart. "I want to stay with Ethan Ward," she said clearly. "He saved me when no one else would. He taught me I had worth. Her voice caught for just a moment. "He showed me what a real father should be." A soft murmur ran through the watching crowd. Sheriff Conley shifted uncomfortably by the door. Sam Harlan opened his mouth to protest, but Peterson held up his hand. "I've heard enough," the clerk declared. "Based on the evidence presented, including Reverend Matthews's sworn affidavit and the testimony of the respected scout Henry, I find no legal merit to the boarding house claim." He dipped his pen in ink. "Furthermore, I find Samuel Harlan unfit for guardianship of his natural daughter." Sam lunged forward with a roar, but Henry and the sheriff caught his arms, holding him back. His curses filled the small office until Conley dragged him outside, where his shouts faded into the morning air. Peterson pushed a document across his desk. "Mr. Ward, if you'll sign here, this grants you full legal guardianship of Anna Harlan, with rights of inheritance as your ward and heir." Ethan stepped forward, his hand steady as he took the pen. Anna watched as he signed his name with careful strokes, making each letter count. When he finished, he stepped back and placed his hand on her shoulder. "It's done," Peterson announced, adding his own signature and official seal. "Miss Anna is now legally your ward, Mr. Ward, with all rights and protections therein." He smiled slightly. "Though it seems she was already your daughter in all the ways that truly matter." Anna turned to face the crowd still pressed against the windows and doorway. She stood tall beside Ethan, her head held high. The same faces that had jeered at her weeks ago now showed different expressions. Respect, wonder, even shame. But their opinions no longer held power over her. Reverend Matthews beamed as he gathered his papers. "The Lord works in mysterious ways," he said softly. "Sometimes it takes a winter storm to help new things grow." The heavy oak door of the clerk's office creaked open as Ethan and Anna stepped out into the crisp morning air. Pine Ridge's main street stretched before them, rutted with wagon tracks in the fresh snow. The same townsfolk who had gathered to witness Anna's shame weeks ago now lined the wooden sidewalks, their faces a mix of wonder and regret. Anna felt Ethan's strong hand settle on her shoulder, warm and protective through her woolen shawl. The touch steadied her, reminding her she wasn't alone anymore. She lifted her chin, determined to walk with the dignity her new father had helped her find. "Look at her now," someone whispered, "standing tall as a pine." "Who'd have thought?" another voice murmured. Mrs. Baker, the general store owner's wife who had once tutted disapprovingly at Anna's presence, stepped forward with reddened cheeks. "Miss Anna," she said, twisting her apron in her hands, "I wonder if you might consider helping at our Sunday school. We're short a teacher for the little ones." Anna's heart skipped. Teaching, her secret dream. She glanced up at Ethan, who gave her a slight nod. "I'd be honored, Mrs. Baker," she replied, her voice clear and steady. "Thank you for asking." They continued down the street past the telegraph office where old Mr. Jenkins tipped his hat, past the millinery where Miss Sophie smiled warmly through the window. The saloon yard came into view, the very spot where Sam had tried to sell her. Anna's steps faltered for just a moment. "Keep walking," Ethan murmured. "You're stronger than any memory." Henry appeared beside them, his moccasins silent on the packed snow. "The people see now," he said quietly. "They see what was always there, a daughter of worth." As they passed the saloon, the door swung open. Sam Harlan stumbled out, still reeling from the clerk's ruling, his bloodshot eyes fixed on Anna and his face twisted with spite. "Think you're better than you're raising now?" he sneered. "Putting on airs with your new fancy family?" Before Anna could respond, Ethan stepped between them. His voice carried across the street, measured but firm. "Anna is exactly who she always was, a good girl who deserved better than she got. The only difference now is she knows it." Several men moved to block Sam's path as he lurched forward. Sheriff Conley appeared from nowhere, his badge glinting. "That's enough, Harlan. Go sleep it off." Sam spat in the snow but turned away, shoulders hunched against the cold. Anna watched him go, feeling not anger or fear, but a deep sadness for the father he could have been. They collected their horses from the livery stable, where the owner had taken extra care with their mounts. "Fine animal you got there, Miss Ward," he said, patting the dappled mare's neck. The name, Miss Ward, rang sweet in Anna's ears. The ride to Henry's cousin's cabin took them through stands of snow-laden pines. The afternoon sun caught ice crystals in the air, making them sparkle like scattered diamonds. Anna's mare followed Ethan's stallion's tracks, her hooves crunching rhythmically in the snow. Henry's cousin Running Cloud lived in a snug cabin where the foothills began to rise. Smoke curled from the stone chimney, and the smell of cooking beans and cornbread welcomed them. Running Cloud's wife, Sarah, a settler woman who had married into the tribe, met them at the door with a wide smile. "We heard the news in town," she said, ushering them inside. "This calls for a feast." The cabin's interior glowed with warmth from the cooking fire. Dried herbs hung from the rafters, their sweet scent mixing with the hearty aroma of Sarah's cooking. Henry's children played quietly in the corner with carved wooden animals, while their mother stirred a pot of rich stew. As they settled around the scarred pine table, Running Cloud offered a traditional blessing in Apache, which Henry translated, "For the gathering of family, for the healing of hearts, for the path that brings the lost one home, we give thanks." Anna helped Sarah serve the meal, moving with new confidence. The stew was thick with venison and winter vegetables, the cornbread golden and steaming. They ate companionably, sharing the day's events with their hosts. Sarah nodded in approval when they described the clerk's ruling. "I've seen how some folks treat those who are different," she said, glancing fondly at her husband. "But love makes its own family, stronger than blood sometimes." As the meal drew to a close, Anna found herself gazing into the dancing flames of the hearth. The events of the past weeks played through her mind like pages in a book. The shame of the auction block, Ethan's unexpected rescue, the slow building of trust, her desperate flight into the snow, and finally, today's triumph in the clerk's office. "I never thought anyone would fight for me," she said softly, almost to herself. The conversation around the table stilled. Ethan set down his coffee cup, his weathered face serious in the firelight. "Family fights, Anna," he replied firmly. "And you are mine." Tears pricked at Anna's eyes, but they were tears of joy, not sorrow. Henry reached over and squeezed her hand. "The Great Spirit brings healing in his own time," he said. "Some flowers only bloom after the hardest frost." Sarah began clearing the dishes, and Anna rose to help. As they worked side by side at the washing basin, Sarah spoke quietly. "I know something of choosing a new family," she said. "It takes courage to leave the old behind. But look what you've gained. A father who sees your worth, friends who stand beside you, a future bright as new snow." Through the cabin's window, Anna could see the first stars appearing in the deepening blue of the evening sky. They blazed with unusual brightness, as if celebrating with her. Running Cloud's children had fallen asleep by the fire, their small faces peaceful in the dancing light. Ethan stepped up beside her at the window. "Time for evening prayers," he said softly. "Reckon we have much to be thankful for tonight." They gathered around the table once more, heads bowed. Running Cloud removed his hat, and Henry folded his hands respectfully. The only sound was the crack and pop of the fire as Ethan's deep voice filled the cabin. "Lord, we thank you for your mercy that makes all things new, for family found in unexpected places, for strength to stand tall when the wind blows hard, for justice that comes in your time, for the gift of this daughter." His voice caught slightly. "Who teaches me again how to love?" "Amen." "Amen," the others echoed. Anna opened her eyes to find the cabin filled with a gentle peace. Outside, countless stars blazed in the crystal-clear sky, their light reflecting off the pristine snow. Each one seemed to whisper of possibilities, of dreams now free to grow, of a future where she could stand proud as Ethan Ward's daughter. Sarah brought out a special treat, maple candy she'd been saving for a celebration. As they savored the sweetness, Anna realized that for the first time in her life, she felt truly at home. Not in any particular place, but in the circle of these people who had chosen to become her family. The fire settled into glowing coals and the night deepened outside the cabin windows. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, a home to build, a life to grow into, a future to shape. But tonight was for giving thanks, for savoring the miracle of belonging, for treasuring the love that had fought for her and won. A pale dawn crept over the horizon, painting the snow-covered ranch in gentle hues of pink and gold. Anna stirred beneath her quilts, awakening before the rooster's crow. The habit of early rising came naturally now, a rhythm born of purpose rather than fear. She dressed quickly in the chilly air, wrapping a warm shawl around her shoulders. The wooden floorboards creaked softly under her feet as she made her way to the kitchen. Through the window, she could see Ethan already at the barn, his breath forming clouds in the morning air. The kitchen stove still held embers from the night before. Anna added kindling, coaxing the fire back to life. As warmth spread through the room, she mixed biscuit dough with practiced hands. Her movements were sure now, no longer tentative. This was her kitchen, her home, her family. Outside, the hens clucked impatiently. Anna filled the feed bucket, its weight no longer daunting. The morning air bit at her cheeks as she scattered grain, counting each hen carefully. One broody hen had nested in the corner and Anna gently checked beneath her for eggs. "You're getting mighty good at that," Ethan's voice came from behind her. He stood in the barn doorway, a smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. "They trust me now," Anna replied, showing him the fresh eggs. "Even old Red here doesn't peck anymore." Ethan nodded approvingly. "Animals know honest care when they get it. Same as people, I reckon." Back in the kitchen, Anna worked efficiently preparing their morning meal. The biscuits turned golden in the oven while she fried eggs and salt pork. Coffee bubbled in the tin pot, its rich aroma filling the cabin. She had learned exactly how Ethan liked his coffee. Strong enough to stand a spoon in, he always joked. They sat together at the scarred pine table, morning light streaming through frosted windows. Ethan bowed his head for grace, his deep voice grateful for their blessings. Anna noticed he always included thanks for family now, and warmth filled her heart each time. After breakfast, while Ethan tended to the horses, Anna cleared the table and reached for her precious books. Reverend Matthews had loaned her several volumes, a primer, a book of history, and even a slim volume of poetry. She traced the leather bindings reverently before opening to her marked page. Each evening, she studied by lamplight, mouthing the words carefully. Sometimes, Ethan would pause in his own tasks to listen as she read aloud, offering help with difficult words. His patience never wavered, his encouragement steady as the North Star. When Sunday arrived, Anna rose with special care. She had mended her best dress, adding a bit of lace collar the Reverend's wife had given her. Her hair, once hastily tied back, she now braided neatly. In the small mirror, she barely recognized herself, not just for the careful grooming, but for the quiet confidence in her eyes. Ethan had hitched the wagon early, laying fresh straw in the bed to ward off the cold. He wore his good coat and had polished his boots until they shone. As they drove toward town, the winter morning sparkled around them, pine boughs heavy with snow. The little church's bell rang clear across the valley, calling the faithful to worship. Anna felt a flutter of nervousness as Ethan helped her down from the wagon. The last time many of these people had seen her, she had stood on the auction block in shame. But today was different. Today she walked beside Ethan, head held high, his strong presence beside her like a shield. The congregation turned as they entered, and Anna steeled herself for whispers or stares. Instead, Mrs. Peterson hurried forward with a warm smile. "Anna, dear, we've saved you both a place near the stove." Other women nodded greeting, and several men touched their hats respectfully to Ethan. They settled into the smooth wooden pew, hymnals shared between them. When Reverend Matthews rose to lead the first song, Anna's voice joined the others without hesitation. The familiar words of "Amazing Grace" filled the small church, and she felt Ethan's quiet pride as she sang the harmony she had practiced at home. Our Lord delights in the joy of his children, Reverend Matthews preached, his kind eyes sweeping the congregation. In the healing of broken hearts, in the making of new families, in the triumph of love over darkness. Anna felt the words settle in her soul like a warm blanket. After the service, several families lingered to chat. Young Mary Thompson shyly asked Anna if she might visit sometime, and Mrs. Peterson pressed a recipe for molasses cookies into her hand. The same community that had once stood silent at her shame now offered simple friendship. The ride home seemed shorter, warmed by the morning's acceptance. As they crested the hill overlooking their valley, Anna spotted another wagon approaching the ranch, Henry's distinctive paint horse tethered behind. "Looks like we have company for dinner," Ethan said, pleased. "Good thing you made extra stew yesterday." Henry had already started a fire in the yard when they arrived, the smell of coffee mixing with wood smoke. His dark eyes twinkled as he helped Anna down from the wagon. "The church clothes suit you both," he observed with a smile. Inside, Anna bustled about setting the table while the men talked outside. She could hear their low voices mixed with occasional laughter, the sound of family and belonging. The stew bubbled fragrantly on the stove, thick with vegetables from their root cellar. They gathered around the table, steam rising from their bowls. Henry passed the cornbread, complimenting its golden crust. The conversation flowed easily, ranging from ranch business to town news to Henry's children's latest adventures. "You've grown stronger," Ethan remarked during a lull, looking at Anna with fatherly pride. "Not just in body but in spirit. These past weeks have brought out what was always there, just waiting to shine." Anna felt her cheeks warm at the praise, but she didn't duck her head as she once would have. Instead, she met his eyes, her smile true and steady. "I had someone believe in me," she said simply. "It makes all the difference." Henry nodded sagely. "Like young trees after winter," he said. "With strong roots and room to grow, they reach for the sun naturally." The afternoon passed in comfortable companionship. Anna served coffee and the last of her apple pie while Henry told stories of his scouting days. Ethan's deep chuckle joined her lighter laughter, the sound of their happiness filling the cabin's warm air. As the winter sun began to set, Henry rose to leave. "My wife will be wondering where I've gotten to," he said, gathering his coat. At the door, he turned back. "It does my heart good to see this home filled with family again." After he left, Anna and Ethan sat by the fire, enjoying its warmth and each other's company. The dishes could wait a while. Outside, the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, bright and steady as hope. "Pa?" Anna said softly, the word still new and precious on her tongue. Ethan looked up from stoking the fire. "Thank you. Not just for saving me that day, but for showing me who I could become." Ethan was quiet for a moment, watching the flames dance. When he spoke, his voice was gruff with emotion. "You did the becoming yourself, girl. I just gave you safe ground to grow on." Anna smiled, knowing the truth lay somewhere between, in the mystery of love freely given and gratefully received, in the miracle of two lonely hearts finding home in each other. She picked up her borrowed book of poetry, settling deeper into her chair as Ethan filled their cups with fresh coffee. The fire crackled peacefully, casting warm light over father and daughter as they shared the quiet evening, each thankful for the precious gift of belonging. The January wind howled outside, but inside Ethan's cabin, warmth and purpose flourished. Anna sat at the rough-hewn table, hands trembling as she read the letter that had arrived that morning. The county school board was seeking new teachers for the growing territories. Reverend Matthews had visited earlier that week, his eyes twinkling as he suggested Anna might consider applying as an assistant teacher once she turned 18. "We need good hearts and sharp minds," he'd said, watching her reaction carefully. Anna's chest tightened with hope and doubt. "But surely they wouldn't want," she began. "They'd be fortunate to have you," Ethan interrupted firmly, setting down his coffee cup. "You've got the gift for it. I've watched you with Henry's young ones when they visit." Each evening after supper, they cleared the dishes and Ethan brought out the books. Anna's voice, once hesitant, grew stronger as she read by lamplight. When she stumbled over difficult words, Ethan waited patiently, offering gentle corrections. "Imagine," she whispered one night, looking up from her reading, "teaching little ones their letters. Even the poorest children like I was. Ethan nodded, his weathered face soft in the lamp's glow. You'll give them what you never had, he said quietly. The cabin that had once echoed with lonely silence now rang with purpose. Words flowed like water, washing away old hurts, nourishing new dreams. Each night, Anna's reading grew more confident, her dreams more certain, while Ethan listened with a father's quiet pride. Spring painted the Colorado mountains in vibrant hues as winter's grip finally loosened. Streams swollen with melting snow rushed down rocky channels, and tender green grass sprouted in meadows that had lain brown and dormant for months. Ethan and Anna rode side by side into Pine Ridge, their horses' hooves squelching in the muddy street. The morning sun caught Anna's face, showing how these past months had transformed her. Gone was the shrinking girl who'd once been mocked on the auction block. In her place sat a young woman with purpose in her eyes. Townsfolk called out friendly greetings as they passed. "Morning, Miss Harlan." Mrs. Peterson waved from the general store. "Good luck with the board today." Inside the weathered schoolhouse, Anna stood before 5 stern-faced trustees, her heart hammering. But when she glanced back and saw Ethan's encouraging smile from the last bench, strength flowed into her voice. She read clearly from McGuffey's reader, then demonstrated how she would explain simple sums to young children. "And how would you handle a stubborn pupil?" asked Mr. Thompson, peering over his spectacles. "With patience and faith in their ability to learn," Anna answered steadily. "Every child deserves that chance." The trustees exchanged approving looks. Within minutes, they agreed she could begin as assistant teacher when the new term started. Outside, Anna grabbed Ethan's calloused hand. "We did it, Pa," she whispered, tears shining in her eyes. Ethan squeezed back, his own eyes glistening. "No, Anna, you did it." Golden summer sunlight streamed through the schoolhouse windows, dancing across the wooden floorboards. Anna stood before the chalkboard, her voice gentle but clear as she guided 6 young students through their alphabet. Her finger traced each letter with care, and the children's eager faces followed her movements. "Remember," she said warmly, "the letter B makes the sound like a busy bee." From his place on the back bench, Ethan watched silently, his weathered hands folded in his lap. Pride softened his usually stern features as he observed the confident young woman his daughter had become. When one small boy struggled with his letters, Anna knelt beside him with encouraging words, showing the same patience Ethan had shown her during their evening reading sessions. At recess, children's laughter filled the yard. Anna joined their game of tag, her own laugh ringing out, free and joyful, so different from the frightened girl of that bitter winter day. After the children departed, Anna and Ethan walked together down Pine Ridge's dusty main street. Shopkeepers and townspeople nodded respectfully, several touching their hats. They paused at the ridge overlooking Ethan's ranch, where golden evening light painted the distant mountains. "Such changes since that auction day," Ethan mused quietly. Anna turned to him, her eyes bright. "You saw me worth saving." Ethan's voice grew rough with emotion. "And God gave me a daughter." They stood together as the sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, father and daughter bound by choice and love stronger than blood. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.